I'm Theo.
And I'm Juliet.
And this is Apologies Accepted.
We offer an entertaining look at some of the big issues in history by examining public apologies of the famous and infamous.
We're looking at politicians, serial killers, actors, and you.
Send us a public apology you would like to make, and we'll read it on the air and give you a chance to redeem yourself or just get some guilt off your shoulders.
We're here for you. Once a week, maybe more if you're really, really sorry. Everybody.
This is Apologies Accepted.
The podcast.
And I'm not Theo.
And I'm not Juliet.
And that's all very lovely. So I'd like to know, Theo, what's shaking bacon?
So not a big topic, but a big topic. I have hit a point where I am just done with identity politics. And before everybody starts gasping, I absolutely endorse people being able to be themselves and identify in whatever way they want to. And I support you fully, except for Gen Z and the stupid Zoomer stuff. Have you heard that Gen Z now wants to be called Zoomers?
I had a discussion with Brent about this. I think it was Brent about this the other day, and I kept insisting that he stop using the word Zoomers, and he kept saying it was a legitimate term for a certain generation. But I don't know anything about it other than that.
Well, it's right. So I've heard the term Zoomer like every now and then, and in my head, I made up the answer because I do that for everything, right? How much is 2 + 7? 14. I made up the answer in my head, right? What is a Zoomer? And I figured it was like a boomer who was real young at heart, right? And so that's kind of what I had in my head. And no, it turns out that a certain segment of Gen Z wants to be known as Zoomers because that obviously rhymes with boomers, right? And they had like the better lives. So by changing their generational name, they can then get that good luck that the boomers had, right? And kids, that's not the way it works. And two, you're not allowed to change your generational identity. You're just not, right? It has happened one time in the history of recorded Theo, and that is with Generation Y. Remember when Generation Y
no.
So you remember Gen X and the genesis of like, what are we going to call this generation, right? And the conversations in the press, not at the dinner table. My mom didn't care what we were called.
Right.
Around like, oh, well, there was the greatest generation and then boomers. And so all of that makes sense. But what about these kids? And so the X was unknown, right?
I see.
And so Generation Y followed Generation X. And suddenly there weren't these big cultural moments to attach a name to. You couldn't be the greatest generation or World War I generation or whatever.
Right.
And then Gen Y became millennials as we track closer to the year 2000, and the culture was like, oh, these kids are growing up with technology, and oh, Y2K. So, okay, great. Gen Y becomes the millennial generation. That works. But Gen Z, you're not allowed to become Zoomers. And what makes me even angrier is those Gen Zs that say, I'm a Zoomer, and then go back to being Gen Z. Do you know what they're called?
No.
Zoomerangs.
Oh my God, really?
No, I made that up, but isn't it great? I heard the Zoomer thing, and I heard it on a podcast on the left, and they used that term. And Brent had reached out to ask me if I knew what a Zoomer was. And I was like, isn't that like a youthful boomer or whatever, right? And so seemed to be like in the zeitgeist. And then the Zoomerang joke came straight to my head. And I was like, okay, you're going to have to tell this joke without laughing. So you're welcome. That's what's shaking bacon over here. What's shaking bacon with you?
I still don't have a chair. I may never have a chair.
How?
I just need to resign myself to not having a chair. Well, now it's because the work is coming up. The electrical work that I'm getting done in my house is going to be next week, not this week. And I figure I might as well just get rid of this chair and then get a new chair to replace it once the electrical work is done. So I've stopped looking at chairs and I'm just waiting for the work to get done, which I hope will get done smoothly and quickly without too much trouble. But we have to move a lot of our furniture out of the way for them to complete this work. And my anxiety is through the roof about it. And Brent doesn't seem to be worried about it at all. And he's like, oh, it's not so bad. They'll do what they need to do and we can take care of it. I'm like, no, it'll be terrible. They won't be able to do the work and then they'll sue us and then we'll lose the house. But I don't know. He says like catastrophize. And I think, well, how are you going to prepare for the worst scenario if you don't, think about it? So I don't know. But
fully agree. If you don't have a plan for what happens when the sun explodes,
right,
you're in trouble.
Now I'm going to worry about that. So I think that's all the bacon that I have. I really haven't been doing very much. It's been kind of rainy, so I haven't been going out and doing very, very much. Not that I would anyway, but that's pretty much it. So have you been to the restaurant called Easy Tiger?
I have been to the restaurant called Easy Tiger, and I have feelings about Easy Tiger.
Did you have before we started researching them?
I did. And,
yes.
And so, and they were fine, right? So Easy Tiger is a bakery in Austin, bakery / beer garden / restaurant, but it's more like a cafe type sandwiches, things like that. And I've always enjoyed going to Easy Tiger. We probably go like 4 times a year, right? Mm-hmm. And for a while there, James was in love with their bread. It was the only bread that he would eat. And then their bread started to appear in the local Whole Foods. So heaven for me, because I didn't have to drive to the bakery all the time to get a baguette. Awesome. And it's always been this kind of like just cool, fun, hip place to go hang out and enjoy an afternoon, right? They've got a pretty cool logo and they throw that on their t-shirts, and we had those t-shirts for a while, and it was fun to support a local business, right? And it was good. It was fine. And then so my feelings were, it's a little hometown bakery. It's a little hometown bakery that good for them, right? And now my feelings have changed again, thanks to this week's story. So that's my personal experience with Easy Tiger.
Do they have live music too? I read somewhere they have like events like beer tastings and live music.
They do. But I'll say like that's a very Austin thing. So it doesn't make them unique.
Special. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't make you special, Easy Tiger. But also, I forgot this piece. During the pandemic, the early part of lockdown, to use that term, people were baking, right? And the one thing that people were really baking was sourdough. And as an exiled Californian who is trapped in Texas, who can't get good sourdough, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I can make sourdough at home. I'm going to do that. And then I'll make good sourdough bread. And hooray, right? And I couldn't get starter anywhere because everybody was making sourdough bread.
Oh, wow.
And so, yes, you can make your own starter by leaving out some flour that's soaked in water. No, I'm not going to do that. That takes too long. Easy Tiger was selling sourdough starter.
Oh, nice.
And they did not increase their price because of the pandemic. You were limited. You were only allowed like one bag of starter, right?
Right.
But I was so happy. And I sat in line for 20 minutes to go through the drive-thru wearing a face mask. It was all like the gloves, and basically it was like being at the space station and trying to get a glass of orange juice, but you're outside the space station. Right. So lots of great, and things had just started to open up and on a very limited basis. So I thought it was incredibly brave of Easy Tiger to do that, because we're all going to die, but I need sourdough starter too. And they didn't take advantage of the
Sourdough come out.
situation. It got real fucking insane real fast. First of all, that stuff grows like nobody's business. And you're supposed to cut it in half and then give the other half to somebody is what the culture is. Get that joke I did with yeast and bacteria culture? Thanks. But I threw it away because I just had so much of it. And it was like, oh, so I can't go down the street and see my neighbors because we're not allowed to leave the house.
Right.
Like, you know, so we had sourdough everything. And I reached a point where I just could not eat sourdough. And it is we're 4 years later. I still don't really eat sourdough anymore. I've eaten sourdough English muffins, sourdough pancakes, sourdough bread, of course.
Yeah.
And it was fine, but I cannot, and it was only fine. And that's my baking skill. That was not the starter's fault. So I had even more love, which I completely forgot about, for Easy Tiger, because they didn't rip us off during the pandemic when they could have. They could have been like, oh, our starter's $100. Right.
They easily could have done that. So your feeling about Easy Tiger is largely positive prior to this?
Largely positive and very, very tied into what it means to live in Austin.
Okay, cool. Have you been there recently?
No.
Okay. Just curious.
Not since the sourdough. We found a different bakery that does better bread. Sorry, Easy Tiger.
It's probably closer to you too, hopefully. So Easy Tiger has, in fact, faced some criticism recently for its handling of employee tips. Last August, the Department of Labor notified Easy Tiger that its tip pool program at the South Lamar location was not compliant. During the period from August 2022 to August 2023, Easy Tiger had included back-of-the-house staff, such as cooks, prep cooks, and dishwashers, in the tip pool program. And apparently that is a no-go legally. In response, Easy Tiger issued an apology on social media, which we'll talk about in a little bit, saying that they had never intended to underpay their employees and that the inclusion of back-of-the-house staff was mistakenly believed to be permissible. So after the Department of Labor reviewed the payroll records, Easy Tiger reimbursed both current and former front of house employees, such as servers and bartenders, for any discrepancies. The restaurant confirmed that it would not seek to recoup overpaid tips from back of the house staff, which is good. In my opinion, I don't know if they would be able to legally do that, but they weren't even going to try, which was nice. Despite this, a former Easy Tiger employee, whose name I love, their name is Peaches Rose, expressed frustrations with the restaurant's tipping policies, citing confusion over payment structures and perceived shortcuts taken by management. Easy Tiger announced that it's conducting audits at its Link. What's Link? L-I-N-C location?
Oh yeah.
Is that a neighborhood?
It's a location. So it's kind of goofy. It's the name of like a shopping mall, if you will, that's been repurposed, and it's not really a mall, but yeah, the Link. So it's a destination. It's the name of the place, and it's also a whole vibe. We're at the Link.
The vibe. So Easy Tiger is announcing audits at its Link and East 7th Street locations to make sure that similar misallocations of tips did not happen there. In their apology, it addressed its team, expressed regret, and outlined new policies to prevent future incidents. These policies aim to ensure compliance with Department of Labor regulations and include only eligible employees in the tip pool program. In response to inquiries about their future plans, Easy Tiger revealed a commitment to quarterly all-hands meetings to address any emerging issues effectively. Interestingly, in 2022, before this happened, 26 employees resigned from the Easy Tiger on 7th Street due to frustration with upper management after a new president of restaurants, Sue Kim, was instated that January. An employee stated on Instagram that many store employees experienced disrespectful encounters with Kim, including an instance in which she allegedly referred to several managers as the R word, stupid, and unable to talk to their employees. Easy Tiger has since announced that it will close its 7th Street location in April. They say it's due to weather challenges and increased costs. And by weather challenges, apparently it's mostly an outdoor location. Most of their seating is outdoor, and it gets so hot in the summer now that they weren't doing a lot of business in the summer, so they weren't able to make a lot of money. So that's my story about Easy Tiger. Did you have anything additional?
I do, actually.
Oh,
and
cool.
So, yes, because it's not that it's not much of a story, but the Easy Tiger story it's not much of a story. Oh, they did this thing and blah. but I was attracted to it because it was like, oh, Austin. Oh, and I live there. And oh, I've been there. And so let's look at just kind of the recent culture of around tipping. And then we'll look at the history of tipping. Where does it come from and why? Then we'll look at Easy Tiger. So currently in the United States, we're living through what's kind of humorously being called Tipflation, where whatever you do, there is a screen that asks you if you want to tip somebody. Right. And it does get to be very annoying when you go to, I haven't had this at McDonald's yet, but I'll use them as an example. If you go to McDonald's and you order a hamburger and then they flip the screen around and you can pay right away, which is awesome. And then another screen will pop up and then say, do you want to add a tip to this? And okay, not at McDonald's. You guys, right? So, but it is permeating our culture. It is appearing everywhere. At the car wash, I went to a car wash recently.
Really?
A drive-through car wash, right? So this was not even anybody was going to get a rag and polish my car, right?
Wow.
Nobody was doing any
Who are
work.
you even tipping? Yeah.
Exactly. Who are you even tipping? And so, and in my head, it's like, oh, okay, all those tips are collected and then split among all the employees, right? But apparently the Department of Labor has feelings about that. Okay, so tipflation is sparking a new debate when it comes to both spending money as consumers and earning money as tipped laborers. A recent Wall Street Journal article noted that even at self-checkouts at a grocery store, where customers ring themselves up, pay, and bag their own goods without ever interacting with an employee, an on-screen prompt to tip can still pop up, making customers feel like they're being emotionally blackmailed.
It would be annoying.
I would just laugh so hard.
Tip myself.
Yeah, exactly. I pay myself, I'll tip myself. They're cutting labor costs by doing self-checkout. So what's the point of even asking for a tip? And where is it going? Ishta Jamar, a senior at American University in Washington, D.C., told the Wall Street Journal. Transactions where an employee is present, but seemingly does very little to assist a customer, brings with it an even higher pressure to tip, especially when the screen is visible to the employee and anybody else nearby. According to a 2022 survey, more than 51% of people had given a few extra bucks when an iPad asked them to, and 54% of respondents said they felt pressured to tip when the employee turns the iPad their way. Although tipping screens predate the COVID-19 pandemic, experts have noted the acceleration of such prompts in its aftermath. William Michael Lynn, Cornell University professor of consumer behavior, told the Associated Press that consumers became more generous with tips during the pandemic to show their support for affected businesses and employees, with genuine feelings of sympathy for those who work jobs with a higher risk of contracting the virus. Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely have forgotten about that moment of like, oh, there are people out there who can't stay home, who have to go to work. And so, yeah, tipping a server for putting their life at risk in those early months as the economy creaked back open, we tipped all the time, right?
Yeah.
So businesses are now taking advantage of an opportunity, said Professor Lin. And new and unexpected industries are catching on to this idea of tipping. So two guys take on real estate, which is a TikTok account, caused an uproar when the two guys suggested that tenants tip their landlords. Employees of the Apple Store in Towson, Maryland, the first Apple Store to unionize, has requested tip solicitation as part of its agreement with the company. Oh, no, Apple, I'm not tipping the employees. Thank you. The California Department of Industrial Relations cites Labor Code 351, which prohibits employers and their agents from sharing in or keeping any portion of a gratuity left or given to an employee, right? According to the law, a tip is money a customer leaves for an employee over the amount due. And I threw in that California piece mostly because it's nice to recognize that somebody is keeping an eye out on this concept of pooling all the money together and then splitting it among all the employees. So
Yeah.
it's kind of the current state of tipping culture in the U.S. Now let's look at the history of tipping. The concept of tipping, which involves a gratuity to service workers in addition to the basic cost of the service, did not originate in the United States. Instead, it traces back to the taverns of 17th century England, where I am very happily at home. Patrons could slip money to the waiter to ensure promptitude, TIP. This practice was meant to motivate faster and better service. Over time, it evolved into a voluntary and later expected addition to a worker's regular income. The custom crossed into American society in the late 19th century. Wealthy Americans who traveled to Europe encountered the practice and brought it back as a way to showcase their elevated status and sophistication. However, the initial reception of tipping in America was not welcoming. It was viewed as undemocratic and contrary to egalitarian. I can never say this word. In my head, I can. Egalitarian?
Egalitarian.
Thank you. Egalitarian ideals. Tipping was met with resistance, with some states even attempting to enact laws banning the practice in the early 20th century. These laws were short-lived because it involved money. These laws were short-lived as the cultural embedment of tipping was too strong to overturn. Okay, that's a sentence. Adoption in the restaurant industry. The restaurant industry adopted tipping primarily as a way to economize costs following the abolition of slavery. Employers, I know, we're going to blame slavery on this, and we're going to blame emancipation on this, sorry. Employers, particularly in the hospitality sector, saw an opportunity to maintain a low-wage labor force where the customers, rather than the owners, would bear the brunt of compensating the workers. This practice allowed restaurant owners to pay their staff minimal wages with the expectation that tips would make up the difference and ensure a livable wage. The tipping model received a significant boost during the Great Depression of the 1930s when restaurant owners were struggling financially. Lowering wage costs by making salaries heavily dependent on tips became even more appealing. It was also around this time that the idea of tipping as a social norm really took hold, transforming from an aristocratic affectation to a widespread expectation. Economic impact on employees. So obviously, the reliance on tips has had a significant economic impact for employees within the restaurant industry, specifically restaurants. For many workers, especially in states where the minimum wage law allows for a lower wage to be paid to tipped employees. And so for international listeners, there is a federally mandated minimum wage, the least amount an employer can pay somebody at an hourly rate, but in which I forget what it is. I think it's still federally like under $8, but It seems like really minimum wage is about $15 to $20 an hour now. But in the restaurant industry, the minimum wage can be as low as $2.13 per hour. And that's a figure that I recall from the 80s because I had friends who were servers, right? So that has not changed. And so the restaurants will pay a server $2.13 per hour, making employees heavily dependent upon gratuities. On average, tips can constitute 60 to 85% of a server's earnings, with this number varying widely depending on the establishment and location. And so, for tipping, yet at the same time, it's just sort of, it's the way things are. And if you don't tip, it's awful, right? Because you end up actually costing a server money.
Right.
Do I need to tip? And it's Starbucks, whatever. If I'm feeling especially nice, I'll throw a buck in a jar, right?
Right.
But now feels a bit like, hello, I've got a shiny nickel for you. Here you go. Don't spend it all in one place. Right?
Right.
A buck isn't anything anymore.
Well, the thing that bothers me is the percentage that you tip seems to keep going up. Like it used to be 20%, and now it seems like it's 25%. And that doesn't seem fair because as prices go up, the percentage, not the percentage, but the amount that you tip goes up along with that. So I don't see why the percentage has to go up as well. But that's just me. So
It is, and it does, and it's annoying, and it's just that it's that thing of the expectation around it. Not a long time ago, we were out to dinner. It was James' birthday. We went to a local restaurant that was a special occasion restaurant. It wasn't super fancy, but it wasn't cheap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a group of about 10 people that came with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a nice evening out. And oh gosh, and I forget how exactly what the setup was, right? But at the time, LA didn't have a way for split checks. So if you went to a restaurant, you got a bill and everybody paid the bill together jointly, right? And so when I would go out with my friends, it was always a lot of shuffling of cash around, and then somebody would be like, I'll use my credit card. I get the points, right? And okay, fine, right? And so whatever, we did all of that, and we left the tip, and we walked out of the restaurant. And as we walked out of the restaurant, the manager came chasing us and said, was something wrong? And we were like, sorry, what? Right? Mm-hmm. And this was, I'm going to say 2004.
Yeah.
Right? And so there weren't smartphones. There wasn't this concept of digital cash. We were still very heavily focused on cash. And we were like, no, everything was fine. And he said, okay, well, I don't understand because you only tipped 18%.
Oh my gosh.
And I could not believe.
Wow.
That one, the standard was 15%. Right? That was like the service. If the service was good, you tip 15%. And I think in those days, you could get away with tipping 10%. Right? And couldn't believe that he chased us out. Also couldn't believe that it happened in the course of like 2 minutes.
Wow.
We were still in the parking lot, right? And it's like, you calculated that cash all that quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we didn't have any more paper money on us, right? And so it was a really awkward, awful situation.
I would never go back to that restaurant.
No, we didn't, and the restaurant closed, but it didn't close because of us. It closed because we did, and that's the power that we yield.
That's right.
Yeah.
Not only can you tip as little as you want, but you can close restaurants.
That's right.
They complain.
So, tipping culture out of control in the U.S. People demanding expectation / demanding 25% as a tip, right, is
crazy,
just beyond. And so as we were researching this, I was like, I wonder about the history of Easy Tiger. Let me find out about it. And didn't find out anything much about the history of Easy Tiger, but I did find out that their employees do not love them.
I read some of the comments on some of the articles about them, and yeah, their employees are kind of mad.
Oh, wow. And so I found a Reddit thread, right, which was like, oh, don't work here. And an employee started the thread with a whole, oh, my hours were cut and I'm not getting enough time. And then they told me that my last day was July 2nd, but I hadn't given notice. And it's like, honey, that's called being fired.
Yeah.
You don't quit. They told you when your last day was. And so that's that. And so anyways, reading through the thread, some of the people sounded very reasonable and some of the people sounded unhinged. And here's one that's both. Okay, this is from 2 years ago. And they say, I'm not going to mention the person. They mentioned the manager by name. I will not mention the manager's name, right? So X was the first person to fire me. I deserved it, though. Okay, well, that sounds reasonable. You're self-aware, right? I'd been up all night doing coke and whippets with a stripper. Missed my alarm and no called, no show. This was back in 2014 at the 6th Street location. Okay, number one, you're doing coke and whippets?
Yeah, right.
You're doing the most expensive drug and the cheapest, dumbest drug? And then with a stripper, I need to know what's happening here, right? Let's see. Okay. And then they say X was a real battle axe back then. And it looks like things haven't changed much. When I was there, all the servers were scheduled 20 hours per week, except for the favorites. And they were constantly hiring new servers on account of servers being fired, taking off because they weren't getting enough hours. Easy Tiger definitely had the most toxic work culture of any place I've ever been employed by, which is a good thing now because I know what red flags to look for.
Mm.
And me too, brother. It's Coke and whippets.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there were a lot of people who have a lot of employees who have very negative feelings about Easy Tiger as an employer. And I was a bit surprised by that.
Well, I mean, I don't know that a lot of restaurants would get rave reviews from their employees.
True.
And for various reasons. So
people, they have to work with people.
They have to work
we
with
all
people.
suck. Yeah.
So maybe it's not so much a condemnation of Easy Tiger, but maybe it is. I don't know. I've not worked there. I've not even been there.
Well, don't, because I hear it's a horrible place to work and they have to ship servers in from other states because nobody in Austin will work there now. If you know, you know.
That's
now,
right.
Whether that's all true, I don't know. But I will say Easy Tiger remains a popular place. Don't sue us, Easy Tiger.
Well, let's look at their apology. So they put their apology up. I think it was on Facebook, but it may have been on Instagram, but I think it was Facebook. It said, "We want to take a moment to acknowledge we made a mistake with our tip pool program. We are making it right, and we owe an apology to our team and community. Under prior management, we altered our tip pool program and included some back-of-house staff from August 2022 to August 2023, mistakenly believing this was permissible. All team members who were impacted at South Lamar have received full and corrected payments. We are now conducting a thorough and voluntary financial audit of our Lake and East 7th Street locations to ensure any front-of-house team member impacted will receive the correct allocation of tips. To our team, we are sincerely sorry and are implementing new policies to make sure this never happens again. Please know we never intended to pay our employees less than they were entitled to from their hard work and commitment to you, our customers. We pride ourselves on being an organization that challenges each other to be better, and we appreciate your support as we make good on that promise." And it's signed David Norman, head dough puncher, which makes me hate them, and founder, and Gina Perez, director of restaurants. So I asked ChatGPT what it thought of the apology, and ChatGPT said, "While Easy Tiger's apology acknowledges the error and outlines corrective actions, its success in rebuilding trust hinges on the sincerity of its ongoing efforts to prioritize fair treatment of employees. Continued transparency and adherence to new policies will be crucial in restoring confidence in the establishment." To which I say, amen, ChatGPT. If we look at our criteria, was there an expression of regret? Yes. There was also an explanation of what went wrong and an acknowledgement of responsibility. There was a declaration of repentance and an offer of repair. There was no explicit request for forgiveness, however. And the dough puncher thing makes me take a couple points off the apology as well. So I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10.
Oh, right.
And I do accept it conditionally. Like ChatGPT said, we need to make sure that they actually do the right thing going forward.
Well, I will say this is one time where we don't have exactly the same number. I'm giving it an 8.5. I think it's a really good apology, and why they're getting an extra little smidge, that 0.5, it's that they've actually done something right, where they compensated employees and they made it right, and they didn't punish the people who had been paid tips who should not have received those tips. So they didn't go back and say, "Hey, Sam, give us that $5 back." Right. So, all right,
which
cool.
They could have done.
So
I think
8.5 from me. I did not think to go to ChatGPT and ask it in its wisdom, "What should I do, ChatGPT?" And so our robot overlords are slowly taking over.
Yeah. Pretty soon they'll be doing this podcast.
They basically are. I use ChatGPT for the history of tipping.
That's great. So our combined or average rating for this apology is like 7.75 or something like that. So or 8, I don't know. I'm not good at math. but it's not so bad. I think overall it's a pretty decent apology, but my caveats are that they said they never intended to pay our employees less than they were entitled to, but they took money from the servers. So obviously they did intend to pay the servers less than they were entitled to. And some people who commented on the articles were like, oh, they're only apologizing because they got caught, which is probably true as well. Maybe they didn't know that they were doing something wrong, and that would be an excuse of some sort, but the employees are not happy with that. So
somebody must have turned them into the Department of Labor, because the Department of Labor does not monitor restaurants to this level of detail. Easy Tiger maybe has 6 locations, right?
Oh,
they're
really?
not some big, I mean, they're big. I'd like to own them, right?
Right.
But they're not some big, massive corporation that the Department of Labor is like, oh, what are you doing with your 10 million employees? No, they don't care.
Yeah.
So somebody turned them in.
That's what I was thinking too. So we're in agreement on that point. So do you have a who's sorry now or an apology expected this week?
I do. And apologies for last week when neither of us did.
I didn't get any complaints about it though, so we're good.
Okay, good. So my apology expected is from Nike, and it will be coming, I am sure, very soon. Charges of sexism in their Olympic outfits.
Oh, yeah, I saw that article.
Yeah. And so apparently it's just a question of, why are the women's outfits so
skimpy?
Yeah. And the men's aren't?
Right.
When they're both track runners? What's up with that? So
good question.
It'll be Nike coming forward and saying, so sorry. It's just, we really need to show off those thighs.
There really is a discrepancy too in the outfits they picked as their, not samples, but their examples for the track runners. And I would be pissed off if I were a track runner too, because the men are pretty much covered up and the women are pretty much not.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, absolutely. I agree. So my sorry now or apology expected will probably bring you some deja vu. It will remind you of something, I think.
Driverless cars.
No.
Oh, dang. Okay. I thought I was so smart.
The former chief executive of a biotechnology company who during the early days of the pandemic falsely claimed that he had invented a blood test that could detect COVID-19 in 15 seconds was sentenced on Friday to 7 years in prison for securities fraud, federal prosecutors said. From February 2020 to December 2020, the former executive Keith Berman of Westlake Village, California, engaged in a scheme to defraud people into investing in his company, Decision Diagnostics Corporation, by claiming the test could detect COVID using a finger prick sample of blood, prosecutors said. Now, who does that remind you of?
Elizabeth Holmes.
Amen. Yeah, and Theranos. In reality, prosecutors said Mr. Berman had privately confided in a friend that the test could not actually detect COVID-19. And it wasn't just greed that led Berman to defraud investors. At the start of 2020, Decision Diagnostics had been in dire financial shape because, among other reasons, Mr. Berman had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in company funds to carry on an online relationship with a webcam model.
Are you making that up?
I am not making that up.
You must be. That is so dumb. Nobody would do that. Everybody would do that. Yeah, that is the dumbest.
Isn't it?
Dumbest.
You can't believe people do that shit.
Dumbest. Oh my God.
Any of it. The whole story is dumb. And
good for the webcam model for finding a sucker who was willing to send money. I mean, get that money.
Totally. Hope she managed to save most of it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for an online relationship.
Oh, awesome.
Right?
She gave that money to the webcam model that she's having a relationship with. Yes.
Yeah. So that was about $28 million in investor losses that occurred as a result of Mr. Berman's scheme. So I'm expecting an apology from him at some point during this trial. I guess he was sent, so if he didn't apologize, he never will. Oh, well.
He'll apologize at the parole hearing.
Yeah, I bet he will. All right. Well, that's it for me.
And, okay, I have 45 other things. No, I'm totally kidding. We do live in a world where I might have 45 other things. No, I got nothing too. Nothing but the end of a show.
We'll say thanks, everybody. Don't trip potato chips. Don't trip potato chips. Yeah, and stay cool, cucumbers.
And I've got nothing clever to say.
All right. Next time you can say stay cool, cucumbers, and I'll say don't trip potato chips.
I love that idea. Thank you for sharing your cool goodbye slogans with me.
But I get the potato chip one.
Okay. That is the best one.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See you next week. Thank you for listening to Apologies Accepted, the podcast.
You can find links to the articles and the sources in the show notes.
To submit an apology or find out more, visit us at apologiesaccepted.net, where you can also find our merchandise.
We're on Twitter at Apologies Accepted.
And on Instagram at apologies.accepted.
You can support our important work at Patreon.com/Apologies Accepted.
And fuck Facebook.
Bye.
Bye.